Good evening, everyone. Today is April 6, 2022, and I call this the Northern Utah RAC meeting to order. Welcome to the Northern Regional Advisory Council meeting. This meeting is held in person in the Weber County Commission chambers in Ogden, Utah, as well as being streamed live on YouTube. This is a public forum allowing you to express your opinions and proposals on the management of wildlife in our state. The RAC considers your ideas, opinions, and proposals and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. We all have our ideas and opinions about what is best for Utah's wildlife, and we approach this with tremendous emotion and passion. I encourage all who wish to express their opinion to do so. However, I ask that we respect opposing views on the issues being discussed. I would appreciate the audience keeping their emotions in check, allowing all individuals to freely express their opinions. Appropriate conduct will provide smooth meeting flow, allowing the RAC to listen, digest, and address all concerns. Opinions and proposals offered for consideration. Rude comments, booing, yelling, hooting, and snickering from the audience while individual comments are being offered will not be tolerated. If inappropriate behavior persists, the offender may be asked to leave the meeting. So right now we want to welcome all of our RAC members and thank them for being here. And we are going to introduce each of them. I'd like to bring to the attention that both David Earl and Junior Goring have been excused from today's meeting. And I believe we'll start here on my right. We'll begin with Ryan.
Ryan Brown at large. Brad Buchanan, sportsman.
Kevin McLeod at large.
Mike Lauder, sportsman's rep.
Darren Perry, Shoshone Nation.
Nikki Wayment, non-consumptive.
Okay, so we have 6 of our RAC members who are here in the chamber with us. And now I'm going to just go by who's on the screen. So we begin with Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie Butler, non-consumptive user.
All right, next we'll have Randy.
Randy Hutchison, at large.
Matthew.
Matt Clark, Ogden at large.
All right, Emily.
Emily Genso, BLM representative, Salt Lake Field Office.
And then Paul.
Paul Chase, Forest Service out of Logan.
All right, so as we're doing today's meeting, this is where we have about half and half. I'm going to ask our RAC members who are joining us virtually that let's do our best to try to use our, so we're not trying to talk over top of each other all the time. If we can use the little hand signal or something, and we'll be watching for that. If for some reason we go a little while and we haven't noticed you, feel free to call it to my attention. So, and then I also want to welcome the public that are attending in person and also those who are watching on YouTube. Those that are attending in person will have the opportunity to provide comments regarding any agenda item. If you wish to make a comment, you must fill out a comment card for the item you wish to address and see that I receive it prior to RAC discussion. Those blue cards are back there on the back. You'll hand them to Jody. She'll make sure they get over here to us. The public that are watching on YouTube will not be able to provide live comments during the meeting. However, the presentations were provided for viewing online, and the public was able to provide comments to the RAC members for this meeting. How the meeting will go then is we will, now I got to go through this. We will first hear about the presentation, or no, we won't hear the presentation, but we'll have the member of the division employee will come up front. We will first ask if there's any questions for members of the RAC for the individual presenting. We will then at that time ask if there's any questions from the members of the public who are attending. After that has been done, we will then go to comment period. We will ask for comments from members of the RAC, and then also comments from members of the public. Then as we go through the discussion, we'll go and we will ask for the division to we'll ask Ben, who will give us a summary of the public comments. Am I missing anything? And then at that time, we'll discuss motions if there are any. So at this point, we'll go ahead and if everyone's had an opportunity to look at the minutes from our last, both the minutes and well, first, I guess the minutes from our last, did everyone have an opportunity to look over those? Were there any problems with those or any issues with that? All right. Do I need to ask if we approve those, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I'd like to call for a motion. Anyone that would approve last, what's that?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting
And today's agenda as well, if you'd add that.
and today's agenda.
So I have a motion from Randy and a second from Ryan. All right.
We have a hand raised by Matt Clark.
Matt, do you have a comment?
Oh, I was just gonna second that.
Okay. All right. So I'll call the vote at this time, the approval of last minutes and today's agenda. I'll begin with Ryan. Yes. Brad?
Yes.
I'm gonna go by the list that I have here. So I'm gonna go to Jamie,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Darren.
Yes.
I did not see Casey, did I? On here yet. Nikki.
Yes.
All right. Kate, we recognize that Casey Snyder's not here. Hopefully he'll be joining us. Have we heard anything from him? All right. He is also not here, so we'll excuse him at this time. All right. We'll go on now to our next agenda item, which is the Wildlife Board meeting update. And I've asked that Ben would do that for us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a way of introduction, I'm Ben Nadolski, Northern Region Supervisor. For the board update, we had a work session for the board. It was an all-day meeting on March 31st. Hopefully, members of the RAC and the public were able to watch it. It was a lot of in-depth conversation and discussion on a number of issues. That kind of work session, I think, is really important, especially in the lead up to a meeting like this, where we at the division have an opportunity to present some of the work, data, and expertise that goes into our recommendations ahead of this cycle. It was a good opportunity for the board and the division to have some banter back and forth on rationale and science behind the recommendations. So if anybody in the public missed that opportunity to see that, there are links on our website. We encourage you guys to go and view that. But other than that, that is our board meeting update for the night. Thank you.
Okay. So this time I'll go ahead and go to our next agenda item, which is agenda item number 4, the regional update. And I'll also turn the time back over to Ben for that as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, as Mike pulls that up, I'll just say it's been a while since we have met together. Are we having some technical issues? Okay. It's been a little while since we've met in the RAC, but so there's lots to update you on. This certainly is not a complete update of all of the work happening in the region, but I just wanted to hit a few highlights from across the sections. Next slide, please. I do want to start just with some introductions. The last time we had a RAC meeting, we were shorthanded, and especially in our habitat section. So at that time, I think 2 RAC meetings ago, we were announcing the retirements of Scott Walker, our then habitat manager, section manager. We also lost Pam Kramer to retirement, and Nate Long moved on to another employer, another opportunity. So we were really shorthanded. Since that time, we've been really busy in the region, attracting as much top talent as we can, starting with Daniel Olson. For those that don't know Daniel, he is our new regional habitat section manager. Daniel is an absolute stud. He's just a really good employee for the division, and we were able to land him here in the region. He's got a BS and a master's degree from BYU. He studied bighorn sheep translocations and habitat use post-translocation during his master's thesis. He then went on to Utah State, where he got a PhD in deer migration and vehicle collision and wildlife migration corridors as it relates to those collisions. So he did spend some time working in the forestry department in Oregon, but came to the Utah to work as Utah's wildlife migration initiative coordinator, and just knocked it out of the park in that role. So we were really excited to have him look for new opportunities and new challenges and come to the region and get regional experience. So we're really excited to have Daniel. He does send his regrets that he can't be here. I asked him to send me a photo of him and his family at Disneyland. He's a family man. If you'll go to the next slide. That's not him. Next slide. That's awkward. Never mind. There we go. Yeah, that's a lot less awkward now. I never heard back from Daniel, but in all seriousness, he is at Disneyland, or he would be here. He is very committed and engaged, especially in this cycle of recommendations. But to his credit, even more engaged to his family life. So you guys will be seeing more of Daniel in future meetings, I'm sure. But in addition to our hiring of Daniel, next slide, is the hiring of Shane Hill. So Shane is our new regional restoration biologist. He just started in earnest on Monday in the region, last Monday. And he comes to us from the central region. He's got a bachelor's and a master's degree from Utah State. Just a really, really hard worker. I'll warn you, he's quiet. He's just a quiet performer. But the work that he does, he gets really engaged, really intense, and he gets great results. And that's the kind of people we look for in the region. So he was, like I said, he's most recently in the central region. While there, he was their impact analysis biologist. We'll get to that position next. But he also was able to get a lot of experience in habitat restoration. You're assuming I remember everything that's on these slides, so as soon as you move it, it throws me off. But he's got a good background in habitat restoration with experience in the central region. He also worked on some really critical migration corridor and vehicle collision projects, especially out in Eagle Mountain, where he engaged like socio-political stakeholders and brought a lot of different parties together to do some really hard projects. So that's the kind of work that we need here. We certainly need more help on impact analysis as well. But another cool note about Shane is he's an FAA certified drone pilot. And if any of you guys watched the partner funding meeting today, the very first presentation by Robbie Edgel was for a project on, I think, Strawberry Ridge. And it really showed some really neat restoration work happening. And through the drone footage that was captured by Shane. So I'm really excited to have his expertise, not only on restoration work, but to be an FAA drone pilot is really difficult. It takes a lot of work. That's okay. Computers sometimes do their own thing. So like I said, Shane was an impact analysis biologist in the central region. That position remains vacant still in our region. We had really grand plans to hire both at the same time and just had some challenges in the recruitment. So we re-announced it. That is flying right now, as well as the vacancy created by Shane. So now applicants who are interested in doing that kind of work for the division can consider an opportunity in both regions. And our hope is that we can attract 2 talented employees to work in those positions in both regions. Next slide. So we'll hopefully in the next meeting, I'll give you an update on who is in that question mark box. Next slide. Of course, our habitat team is busy on a number of things. We were vacant for quite a while, so some duties were definitely stacking up in the region. It was hard to keep them all working, but during that time, we did take ownership of Cinnamon Creek, and the Cinnamon Creek WMA has been top of our priority list for the habitat section, but it's actually a regional effort to come together on some type of interim management plan. So we take ownership completely here any day, I understand. And it's important that when the public has access, when the snow melts, that we've got some type of interim management plan in place while we go toward working on a broader publicly endorsed management plan for the property. So we are hoping to have some kind of like a ribbon cutting event for the property so that we can recognize the partners that helped us get to that point. Details on that are to come, but all of you guys would certainly be welcome and encouraged to attend. to attend. We have a lot of work once the snow melts to get in, do road, fence, sign, and various resource inventories. And so we've got kind of a game plan and staffing set aside to do that. In addition, we'll be doing a baseline range trend survey for the property. So we'll get a sense for what the range is and isn't the moment we took our ownership. And that'll really help us with future management moving forward. And we're hoping to accomplish all of that through a Habitat Council proposal that's in the hopper right now to get a bunch of these initial investments completed. Now we can go to the next slide if the computer will let us. Okay, I also want to welcome Jayla Walden to the team. Jayla's in our wildlife section. She's our Morgan, Southridge, and East Canyon biologist. As she and I agree, that is a mouthful for a title. But Jayla comes to us with a BS and a master's from Utah State. She was working on, never did fill that in. She works on evaluating the effectiveness of our coyote removal program. And she is still working on that and will be wrapping up her master's shortly. But in the meantime, Jayla is an absolute heavy lifter. She does a ton of work and we're really excited to have her. She's worked in the Salt Lake office. She's in the crowd with us. Please wave for the RAC to know. For those of you that haven't met Jayla, she's very experienced, really energetic, really passionate about the work she does. And when she worked in the Salt Lake office, she got a really good background in the process that we're in. She even took some recommendations around the entire state, put them through the board. She also went and worked in the Central region, working on private lands depredation issues. Now she comes to the Northern region, working in a very challenging district, but she's hitting the ground running and is an absolute sponge to learn as much as she possibly can. So if any of you guys don't know Jayla, introduce yourselves after the meeting or during break or whatever. And if you want to jump in a truck and go look at wildlife and learn more about what she's seeing, I absolutely encourage it. You'll learn a lot from her. I know that I have. So next slide. You probably heard, if at this point it was international news, so anywhere you were in the world, you probably heard something about it. But we were able to get our hands on a wolverine. This is the very first time we've actually captured a wolverine in hand in the history of Utah. It was a really exciting day. It was actually the same day that we were doing reviews for when we hired Shane. And my phone was buzzing all day. And just the clamor that it created around amongst our team was really exciting. And I was really impressed and proud of how all of our employees came together and prepared for something that was a once in a lifetime opportunity. That's quoting Jim Christensen, our wildlife manager. But you can see this picture of Dave Rich on my right, your right too, holding the wolverine before we put it back in the cage and transported it for release. He's got a huge smile on his face. I think it's because I told a joke that they kind of look a lot alike, Dave and the wolverine. But all kidding aside, like this is the kind of thing that our people do this work for. When something like this happens, like everybody shows up, everybody's excited. It truly was a moment to make and remember for our careers. So it was really exciting. We do get a lot of questions. Mike, can you tee up the GIF? I hope it works. We get a lot of questions from people asking what this thing is doing. And we've got that radio collar on it. Luckily, we had one on hand that would work. And we are watching and tracking its movements every couple of hours. And it's doing lots of interesting things. And the longer that time goes on, we'll learn more about it. But I asked Sydney Lamb, one of our biologists, to put together this quick kind of short rendering showing what its movements have been since we released it with the radio collar. All right, hopefully you guys can see that. I won't be too specific about some of the locations, but we let it go. We didn't let it go right where it was causing a lot of problems. It was causing a lot of issues with a particular producer, but it immediately took off to high elevation, made it all the way up the East Fork of the Smiths and into Red Castle Lake, went up over the north slope, the ridge from the north slope to the south slope, back again. By now, it's already spent time in Wyoming and in Utah. Now it makes a big old boogie. Looks like it's going right back to, now we're all the way up in another part of Rich County and closer to Cache up toward Bear Lake, and we're actually up toward Deseret, I mean. And so that's what we've got so far. People are asking us constantly, can you give us an update of where this thing's going? I mean, it depends on when you ask me as to where it's at, but this thing's boogieing. And that's exactly why we put a radio collar on it, because it's really freaking cool. But we're going to learn a ton from that animal. And as a result, thanks, Mike, for putting that up. Please, yes. I did want to highlight a few opportunities. There's some opportunities coming up for you guys to join us on some surveys. It's getting to be that time of year. And we've had RAC members join us in the past. Some fun pictures of Kevin and Jamie at work rolling up their sleeves with us. Those are always fun days together. But we've got bighorn sheep lambing surveys that we're going to be doing on Antelope Island. That's something I'm looking to do. Would love to have you join us. We have ongoing sage grouse, sharp-tailed grouse counts happening all the way through April. We're also doing spring deer classifications. So far, our survival rates look to be really good. Jim told me somewhere around 90% survival so far for, but just a caveat, this is also the time where we start to see a lot of loss in survival this time of year. So keep your fingers crossed, but I think they went into the winter in good shape, and they're in good shape right now. So hopefully things continue to work out. And our non-game biologist is doing rosy finch surveys, and that's something that you guys are welcome to join and participate in as well. Next slide, Mike. Out at Willard Bay, our fisheries crew, they collect eggs from walleye, eggs and milk from walleye every year. They use the eggs and milk to basically create more fry that go back into the lake. Some of them go back into Willard Bay. Some of them go back into the hatchery system to be grown out and stocked into other waters. This has been a little bit of a trial and error and a learning process for our biologists, but we're getting really good at it. The walleye size and numbers look great. And we've been doing some evaluations and controlled experiments to try and increase take. And we've seen this year a double in survival of the diploid eggs and a quadruple in survival of triploid or sterile eggs. So the science that we're putting into our efforts are definitely saving us money, and they're also creating more opportunity and more resource for the public. So that's really fun, good news for them. Next slide, Mike. They also hosted a State of the Lake meeting up at Bear Lake. Some of you might have heard a lot of chatter and turmoil about Bear Lake and some plans that were underway or proposed up in Idaho to transplant some fish, some sterile lake trout up to a lake in Idaho. Because of a lot of that consternation, we definitely noticed that there's a lot of space in between a lot of the constituents and the people that we serve, both for Idaho and for Utah. And so both sides came together and said, let's host a conversation about Bear Lake. And so we did that in cooperation with Idaho Fish and Game, had a really good media push from both states, and constituent engagement was great. The conversations I've heard were really good. This was happening during our board meeting on the 31st. But just wanted to give a shout out to our biologists who put themselves out there in the face of criticism and look to really kind of get on the same page with people. And even if that means us moving, we're willing to do that. But constituent engagement and relationships with the public are really important to us, and I'm really proud of the work that they did here. Next slide. We also do a number of non-game activities. We have biologists in our aquatic section doing Columbia spotted frog surveys. These are frogs that inhabit stable wetland areas. They lay eggs in these shallow, kind of warm shoreline areas. And because the frogs are so hard to find, we use those egg masses as a surrogate for frogs. So we're doing surveys in the Upper Provo and the Weber River drainages. That's also another opportunity you guys are welcome to participate in. Next slide. In the Great Salt Lake, we reported last time that we hit a historic low elevation on October 18th, 2021. I think that number still stands. Current elevation is just barely above that. We're a little concerned about the runoff we're about to experience and how much that will or will not affect the lake. But the good news is we've been working really hard with some researchers, particularly at Notre Dame, to develop a model that we can use to help manage salinity. That salinity levels are really key for the entire ecosystem there. And we have some ability to manage salinity through in the South Arm by changing how the flows go from north to south. So we've got some really good science that we're relying on to help mitigate the impacts. Hopefully, I don't think we're ever going to be able to eliminate the impact of no water. We still need water, but we're putting our best minds and science together for the lake. Next slide. Almost done on our waterfowl areas. We've got Phragmites mowing happening for the next 2 weeks. You can see a picture of us mowing with Marshmaster. Thank you, SFW, for buying that exact machine for us. We're putting it to work and doing a lot of good work for waterfowl. We also completed the Teal Lake project out at Farmington Bay. This is an impoundment on the bottom picture where we can control water levels and create more habitat for waterfowl. Again, huge thanks to the SFW for stepping in and helping us fund and finish that project. We also conducted a rotenone treatment at Howard Slough, which was really successful and removed a lot of carp and will help with primary productivity as well. Next slide. That's all I've got. Sorry it was a little bit long, but it's been a long time since we've seen each other. And as much as we reported on, there's so much more that these guys all do and everybody in our office. So I always want to make sure I give them a bump for the work that they do.
Thank you, Ben. I'm starting to wonder if there's anyone left to work in the central region after you finished with all these guys coming up here.
That sounds like a central region problem.
So, well, we welcome everyone here to the best region in the state. So thanks for being here.
Amen.
And I guess right now, if we have any questions, I was amazed to see that Wolverine, that I questioned myself if perhaps that was the one that was on Antelope Island and then in Layton after watching that travel there. I would say there's a pretty good chance that it is. And then just, I would recommend we'll go to. Okay, we'll go to it 1 second. I was just going to also mention that I would hope that everyone would take the opportunity to help on counts or different things. I had an opportunity to go up with Shayla to count deer. She is a heavy lifter, but she still struggled to push that truck out of the mud. We had to get pulled out, but we had a good time counting and classifying deer though.
I think it was after a board member got you guys stuck. Is that right?
Yeah, well,
We'll just go with that.
his son-in-law. But
We'll just go
anyway,
with that.
all right. So I think there was a question online first. We'll go for you, Ben. Who was that had it?
Randy?
Randy.
Yeah, this is just an ignorance question on my part. You're trying to fill the impact biologist spot. What is an impact biologist? I don't know.
That's a good question. Probably one I should have answered when I was explaining it. But, northern region, central region as well, in particular, this state is seeing a lot of growth, explosive growth in certain areas. And that growth can have impacts on a number of resources in the state. And one of those resources is wildlife, both fisheries and terrestrial. And so we have a position in each of the regions that engages with local governments, engages with human development. And our migration corridor in particular, as Shane worked in the central region on the Eagle Mountain project, he worked with local stakeholders to set aside areas that were critical for migration that would alleviate impacts to local communities, but also maintain that connectivity for wildlife. And those are the kinds of things that take a lot of effort and time, but they're super important that we accomplish. And it's the role of that position to do. But it's not a full-time position. Our hope is also to have that position do additional restoration activities in the region.
Okay, and then a quick follow-up. You also said on the new Cinnamon Creek WMA, are you guys putting together a proposal for the Habitat Committee, or is it already put together and it will be presented?
It's already in and submitted. So you'll, if you haven't seen it, if it hasn't been presented yet, you will prior to the funding meeting. But it's a reasonably modest request. It's not a huge request, but timely indeed for making some of these critical investments early on. Our hope is to really make Cinnamon Creek shine. That's what we want for all of our WMAs, but we want to show that when we take ownership of a really important property like this, that we can prove up on our management.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions from anyone here? Kevin.
Wolverine, male or female?
Male. That was easy.
All right. Any other questions about the regional update before we go to our next agenda item?
Okay.
All right. We'll go to agenda item number 5 at this time, the buck deer permit recommendations for 2022. We're going to ask Colby to come up, our big game coordinator and regional wildlife manager also. And hopefully everyone had the opportunity to watch the presentations. And now is your time if you have any questions. And I also invite if there's anything that Colby would like to share additional to what was already presented to us, I guess we'd let him do that at this time as well.
Randy's got a question.
Okay. You ready for some questions?
Sure.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead, Randy.
Just really
Oh.
quickly before, if it's okay, is this mic working? I can't hear. Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. If there are, again, as always, I'm happy to take statewide questions, but the region preps for this all year long, so they get super excited about this. And Jim, it looks like you're in St. George, and either you're in a really white room, which either way you're in a really white room, but it looks like you have one heck of a sunburn. Like, so I hope
No
you're having as
sunburn.
much fun.
Just
you're
that glow about me.
Just that glow. All right, thanks. Sorry, Randy.
No, you're good. Hey, I wanted to ask this just out of the gate because this comes up in comments all the time. And I don't expect you to go in depth on all the management plans or anything like that. But as I was going through and reviewing the comments from the public, several of them came up that appeared to have a disconnect on how the numbers you're proposing or the division's proposing and how those numbers are attained using the management plan. That was a horrible ramble. Sorry. Does that make sense? Could you recap just very briefly? Because I think a lot of people miss how you guys are getting these numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. So when we make buck deer recommendations, historically, we've taken into account really only a few things. Historically, we took into account buck-doe ratio. We took into account the 3-year average of that buck-doe ratio and the trend. And then we could take into account the last year, the year just previous, if there was something big that happened. So that was it. And really, you don't need more than that to manage deer. You can manage deer just like that. But in 2014, we took on a significant collaring effort where we got real survival data. And understanding that, especially on general season units, this buck harvest, the opportunity to harvest bucks, or buck harvest, is primarily driven by those fawns that are 6 months old when we collar them, then become the yearlings in the harvest. And that survival helps us understand like what the number of bucks in the landscape will look like next year, right? And so after having that data, we rewrote the plan in 2019. We said, let's take that into account as well. So now we take into account more than just buck-doe ratio, 3-year average and trend, but we also take into account the reproduction that's coming in that next year. And it allows us to be, instead of looking back, right? Deer management was always looking back on, we harvested this many, this was the postseason classification, this is what happened. Now we project forward and say, okay, here's what our fawn-doe ratios were based on weights, based on body condition. We can anticipate this type of adult survival. We can anticipate this type of fawn survival. And that means we can anticipate the number of deer that should be on the landscape pre-hunt next year and make a recommendation based on that. It's just a more proactive way of making recommendations. It does lead to more swings in permit numbers, but it also results in us offering the maximum opportunity while maintaining the quality that we've agreed to on the landscape and being more proactive. Not waiting till after they get below to cut, not waiting until after they get above to raise, but doing it more proactively. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that was a perfect summary. I like that. I think a lot of people don't grasp what's actually happening, how it's being managed, because they're not aware of how your collaring efforts are going forward, and then just your management plans on each unit. So I wanted to have you have an opportunity to comment on that. Then a quick follow-up on it, because I know this came up in several comments as well. So if you could address it, and it's going to fall right into what you just talked about. There were several people expressed concerns on the increase of permits in the cash unit. Could you address that very quickly?
Yeah. So what if we do this? What if we let Dave talk about the cash, and then if there's anything that I have to add, we'll ask the RAC for permission to do that. But Dave, you want to come tell us about the cash?
So just repeat your question for me. You just want to know why we made the 1,000 tag increase, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to look at them or not, but the RAC feedback, there were, I'm not going to say how many, but I know I read at least a few comments, several comments that were concerned about the increase in permits for the cache. So I just wanted to have someone there explain why.
Sure. Yeah, so we made that increase because we look at the data, as Cody talked a little bit about survival, and you can project. Last year, we had really high survival on both the adults and the fawns. So we had a population increase, and that shows up as we start looking through the data. But as we've classified this last fall, our buck to doe ratio jumped and it ended up around 22. So we saw a spike in the buck to doe ratio. And a lot of there's a lot of young bucks on the ground, but we're over objective. So that results in a increase in permits. And then as we project out, we look at how many we're going to harvest and can kind of estimate where that's going to bring us. And that should start to trend down with that increase in tags. But,
And if it's okay with the RAC, I can join the meeting really quick and share some data that actually helps explain some of this. And Mike, I think my sound is off. Is that okay, Justin?
Yes, please do.
If we join? If my sound's not off, it'll just mess
And
up.
I can hear you, Covey. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I'm trying to hurry. The cache, this was actually a really interesting one. As I read through the comments, and we always pour through the data, but as I read through the comments and then reviewed the data again, it was actually really fun to look at. There's a couple things that we always try to explain to folks and try to separate, the number of the population size, so the number of bucks on the landscape definitely determines the number of permits we can put out there, right? The number of buck permits we can put out there. But the rate at which we hunt bucks rarely determines how fast a population grows or shrinks. The only time it comes into play is if A, you have too many males on the landscape, or B, you have too few males on the landscape. And that's a really broad range, right? Too few would be somewhere below 5 to 8, or nowhere near that. Too many, you start to see negative consequences above 20, actually. There's some pretty good data. There's a couple studies, a Bishop study and another more recent study out of Colorado that both show that when you get up above 20, you start to sacrifice fawns. Okay, so just looking at some of the data that Dave was using, and I'll open up and share Dave's population model really quick and just a little bit of that. Sorry, I opened it before I shared my screen, which was a bad idea. Okay, there's some things I want to, this is a lot of numbers, right? And so I don't want to focus on all the numbers, but there's some things I do want folks to focus on. And this, what I'm trying to do is address some of the concern about raising permits. And so I'll point out some things that may not be directly related to the question, but they'll be related to why, to how populations react regardless of buck harvest. And it shows up really clearly here. So if you come back to the 2021, right here on the left, and I'll just highlight this row, we came with a postseason estimate of 22 bucks per 100 does, right? So we went from 15 in 2020 to 22. Obviously an indicator of we grew deer, right? To have that many more bucks postseason with the exact same number of permits, you had to have grown deer, or your success rates had to have gone down. So the next question, we come over and we ask ourselves, well, what did happen with success? Well, last year with 5,000 permits on the landscape, we harvested just over 1,000 deer on the cache. I mean, last year, by that I mean, it would have been 2020. In 2021, with the exact same number of permits on the landscape, we harvested 1,500 deer. So our percent success increased. Again, another indicator of with exactly the same number of permits, we increased that population. And those are some of the data that then feed the population model, right? You can see that if your success rates increase while maintaining permits, obviously you have to have had something change. And what changed was you had a surplus of bucks. And even more, you ended up outside of the range that you're managing for at 22, which means there's no way to navigate this and stay within the plan. The cache is managed for 15 to 17 unit. The only way to manage that and stay within the plan parameters is then to offer that opportunity back to sportsmen to harvest those animals. So, what we're trying to do is make recommendations to manage to the plan and have the agreed upon quality, agreed upon for general season. So that's exactly what's going on here. Most of the time, buck harvest is always determined by the number of bucks on the landscape. If they're not there, you can't hunt them, right? And we're not hitting any lower biological thresholds. So you can see this is buck harvest over time. You can sit here and this is 21, 20, 19, 18. You can see the good years from the bad years and reproduction. 17, you can see when you had the first drought followed by the first harsh winter, and what happened there is deer fell off and fawn survival fell off and your reproduction was down. A lot of it shows up in buck harvest. It's a pretty simple philosophy. Then when we plug all that in, right, this is where we do the projection. And so this again, Dave used all of these data. We look at success rates, permits that we've had on the landscape, the population estimate that he calculates from the model. Then he predicts forward and says, okay, based on the body condition of my does, what should survival be? Anticipated 93. Right now, it's somewhere, it's over 95 right now. So we're in good shape. Very few deer adults have died on the cache. Fawn survival this year, if things continue, big if, but if they continue like they are, we'll have the highest fawn survival on the cache this year that we've had since we started recording in 2014. So this will be actually maybe even a little bit of a low estimate. But under those parameters, which are very good, safe assumptions, even with high success, so harvesting more bucks, going to come in at the very top of what we're managing for, actually slightly above it. So this is really the lowest increase that we could have made and be within the management plan. A lot of information there. Hopefully that helps. There's a lot that goes into this.
That is phenomenal. That's exactly what I was looking for. And I hope that people that wrote the comments with concerns are taking the time to see that and hear that. So appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. And just one more quick thing. These are all real on the ground data. One of the things that I hear biologists sometimes get accused of is being keyboard biologists, or, they're not doing this. All the data that goes into these are observations that are collected in the field. Survival's collected in the field. Buck-doe ratios are collected in the field. And these district biologists spend a ton of time on their districts in the field, getting the data then to do this.
I have kind of a comment / question, but I think it's safe to say that a lot of the comments that we get probably people recognize. I mean, we're still under objective on the number of deer, but I would say that a lot of people automatically assume when we up the permits, that's going to be detrimental to the growth of the growth of the overall herd. And I think that's where we get a lot of our comments. Someone goes out in the field, they're out there, they're not seeing the number of deer, so it makes no sense to give more permits where we're actually giving opportunity. And at these numbers, we're still able to increase the herd and let the objective go, get closer to our objective.
Well,
correct?
and that's exactly it. That's why the population objective is set in the unit plan and the buck-doe ratio is set in the statewide plan, because it's like I said at the very first, the number of bucks on the landscape definitely dictates how many permits you can put out, right? But it doesn't impact at the end of the day the number of deer on the landscape. And that's because as long as every doe that can have a fawn is having a fawn, what impacts the number of deer on the landscape is how well those fawns and does survive and recruit into that population.
So I guess the question would be, then I'll ask for the public, and I know the answer to this, but the division would recognizes that there are fewer deer on the landscape than
When?
good question. Then over the,
Because there are more than there were last
there
year.
are more
and
than
the
there
year
were in
before.
2020, but
Yeah.
I guess from the heyday of 2000, what people are wanting, I don't know if you
Then
even call that a heyday, but 2015, 14, we recognize there's less.
Yeah, definitely less than there was in 15, 16, for sure. More than there was the last 2 years. So we've grown deer. And that's one thing in northern Utah. As a whole, northern Utah has grown some deer this last year. The rest of the state is the drought. The impacts of the drought have been more severe outside of this extreme northern end of Utah.
Any other questions?
Kobe, can you just quickly, well, I guess that'll be later with the antlerless deer, but just, you see the comments about why we're issuing tags there and
Sure,
the
I'd
philosophy,
love to
but-
address that then.
Any other questions from members of the RAC? Questions from members of the public that are here? You're getting off kind of easy. All right, Ben, will you give us a summary of the public comments at this time?
Sure can. Actually appreciate the conversation that just happened because it's a really good segue into the public feedback. So obviously the RAC members are paying close attention to what they're hearing from folks. Just as a way of introduction to the public feedback, we get responses from a number of people on a number of issues tonight on the agenda. Some of them respond more on certain issues than on others. So the number of actual responses, we had 19 total respondents, but they didn't all respond to every item. So I'll just make that quick note. For the buck deer, we had 15 out of 19 respond. This and the bull elk and buck pronghorn were the main areas, issues of interest that people wanted to comment on. For this particular one, for those 15, we had 13.3 that strongly agreed, 40% that somewhat agreed, 0 neither agreed nor disagree, 13.3 that somewhat disagreed, and 33 that strongly disagreed. So I would say there's somewhat of an even split between agree and disagree, a little bit more toward the agreeable side. Some of the comments on the disagree side were based primarily around the discussion of the cache that we just covered. There were also some general comments, kind of statewide comments, not specific to any units in the region, that were kind of directed toward limiting hunters and reducing tags, but I really couldn't ferret out where they were specifically had concerns. There was some disagreement with our doe tags that are offered on the East Canyon. I think that's probably what Mr. Buchanan is referring to. We'll get to those during the antlerless recommendations. But that was made note in the buck deer feedback. One interesting thing that I think kind of goes back into our regional update was the need for a genuine partnership with the Forest Service. I remember there was a time where people were frustrated with some of the work that was or wasn't taking place on the Monroe and on the Boulder, I think were the examples that were used in the feedback. This commenter was actually showing those two examples as examples in the state for what we need to do up here. And that's something I take to heart. That's why we're working hard to build the best habitat team in the state. We got stiff competition because we got some killer teams around the state, but that's something I promise we're working really hard on. It's something that it's just needs to happen, and we're going to continue to push the pedal as far as we can. There was a question about And I don't know what unit it was, Covey. It was a decrease. We were recommending a decrease in tags, but an increase in the late muzzle loader permits. Was that in the elk? Okay, that's why it didn't make it. That came in the deer feedback as well. But it might have applied to elk. It just came up. In this
I
one.
think I understood what it is. It's asking why there be a decrease in some, and it's because they're not the same across the board. Like the general season, the limited entry muzzleloader permits on general season units, when that went through the board felt very strongly they wanted the biologist to have ultimate discretion over that. So that's how it is. And they can recommend anywhere from the lower end 5, dipper into 0.5% of the total general season permits. So that is deer, excuse me, I'm sorry, Ben. And some of the biologists on the units just go with the straight 5 and some go with more.
Okay. Thanks, Covey. Some discussion about reducing the buck to doe ratio to get better quality. That kind of gets back to your discussion you had with management planning and managing to an objective in the plan. And one comment about not including 2 points in the buck to doe ratios when we do our counts. So that sums up the feedback, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Now at this time, we have comment cards from the public that are on this topic. Kevin, who do we have first?
Troy Justice.
We'll go to Troy Justinson. Members of representing an organization, I believe, get 3 minutes, correct? And those representing themselves 2. So this time we'll give Troy Justinson.
Can I use this mic? Feels more like church to me. Can I use this mic? That works? Okay. No, packed house tonight. Holy cow, couldn't find a place to sit. So. No, Troy Justinson, Sportsman, Fish and Wildlife. We support the division's recommendation with 3 exceptions, and they are not in this region, so bear with me. The first of which is the Fillmore General Season Unit. The division's recommendation is to increase the permits from 12 to 1,400. Our chapters voted to actually take a decrease and issue 1,000 permits. And the reason being is based upon the 3-year buck to doe ratio, it still is under the objective. The next would be the beaver general season. And the division's recommendation is to cut it from 1,400 to 1,200. Our chapters and our members felt like it was important to even take a bigger cut. They're recommending 800 permits total. And once again, basing it upon falling under the buck to doe objective. The third is the Penguich Lake, and the division's recommendation is to increase it by 500. Our committees down there voted to increase it by 250 versus the 500. Mr. Chairman and RAC board members, I hope you'll excuse me and allow me just to take a few minutes. I want to speak a little bit. I come from a meeting today that was a WRI funding meeting. The conservation groups got together. We actually funded close to $4.6 million worth of projects in the state of Utah. That does not include the monies that will come through Pittman Robinson, so it could see 3X. We talked about one of the projects that we were able to fund with some of that money today was Cinnamon Creek. I had mentioned it in a previous RAC meeting that there's several individuals to thank for that, but there's one in particular. That man right there, quite honestly, and when I say there's several, there is several. The division, the legislature, Kevin Norman, Don Pay, but it takes one guy to bring it forth to everybody and keep it aware. And we recognized him at the expo. We gave him the Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Award. That award just come in, so if you don't mind, I would like to give him that bronze.
You better run. You got 40 seconds to make it there.
We're not going to run the clock.
You might want to think that people that are not.
And one thing I want to follow up, make sure, I kind of tout our own drum or beat our own chest today with 4.6 million. And us conservation groups get the credit, but the real credit goes to the average sportsman for the simple fact those permits that they give up is where those monies are generated. So they're the silent partner in this, and they really deserve the most credit. So thank you.
Thanks, Troy. I would recognize Mike as well.
there were so many pieces of that puzzle. I'd like to take just 1 second and thank the groups that supported that effort. We worked on that for months. Ben Nadalski, the Division of Wildlife were huge partners in this. Mike Canning, this thing doesn't come together without, there were a lot of pieces of this puzzle. I was just fortunate to be one of the pieces. So thank you to Sportsman for Fish and Wildlife for acknowledging my effort, but it took all of us to make this happen. I'm super proud of it. It's fun to see it come up on the screen. I kind of giggle here, but thank you everyone. I appreciate it.
Just so
You might-
people are aware. Where did that come? I was just going to say, though, for people aware, so that Cinnamon Creek was part of a school trust land. It was Sitla ground that was going up for sale, and which is what it was designed to do, to raise money for our schools. But fortunately, as it was going up for sale and there was a bidding process, Mike was able to help get groups together to purchase that. And by doing so, it wasn't bought by a private entity that would have taken that property away that had public access. Now that it has been purchased the way that it is now public for everyone to use, and it will stay public. And so Mike had a big part to do with that, is getting the right people in the room. And so again, you did a great job, Mike, and thank you. Jamie?
What is WRI?
I'm going to let Ben do this one.
That's the
Watershed
Watershed Initiative. It's a collective of funding from a number, countless different private, government, and partners that, excuse me, that we put our funds into this restoration initiative. The biologists put the projects in. The partners all come together to rank the projects, to grade them, to make them better, to make sure that they're providing the greatest bang for the buck. But when you have all the money on the table in one place, you're able to look at the types of money, look for opportunities to leverage the money, and to make the most use of it. And that's part of what happened today was some of our partner organizations coming together, looking at some of the funds that were raised through the Conservation Expo funds to put those monies on the ground, put them to work for Utah's public. And I'll just use this opportunity, if it's okay, Mr. Chair, to have the mic, that with all of the passion that's been shared today for the Cinnamon Creek purchase, there truly were so many people involved. And I just want you guys to know, on behalf of the region and the team that we have, we recognize the work that went into it. We know the importance of our stewardship in this role, and I just wanted to tell you that something that I've noticed when it comes up in the region is we bring all of our expertise to the table, and this is one of the things that everybody gets amped up for. It's just one of those things that feels good for everybody all the time when we're working on it. And sometimes that's not always the case. There's a lot of contention in the work that we do, but not when it comes to managing Cinnamon Creek. It's just one of those things that the region is buying into and that our personnel take very seriously. So we want you guys to know that the stewardship is not taken lightly on our side, and really appreciate the work that goes into all that work from our partners.
Oh, we're not hearing you. Jamie, I can see that you're.
Oh, I'm just looking online. I'm learning more right now. Thank you for your answers.
Reading to herself. Okay. So that is the last public comment card that I have. Is there anyone else that may have forgot to bring it up or we missed? All right, now that we've heard from our public comment, I'll now open the time to the RAC for comments and discussion concerning this agenda item.
So there's a few things here, and I'll be honest, starting off, when I first saw the recommendation on the cash, I cringed a little. Not because I didn't think an increase wasn't warranted, but just maybe seeing that number right off the bat. But as a side note to that, I think it's, and what Kobe's explained here, helps a lot when we begin to understand the input data that is going into this. And this isn't just a shot in the dark or just a guess on what we think it can handle. And if you go back to the amount of data that we're coming into these recommendations with, and you can look at the Wildlife Board meeting last week and see a lot of it that the data that's rolling in with the wildlife tracker system and all of these things, it's significant. I mean, I think it's fair to say we have the best system of any Western state right now for the input and understanding where our herds really are and the factors going into all of this. And so I think it's commendable for the division and the amount of work that's been put into there to get us to this point. I feel like going forward, we are making recommendations based off the best data that we've ever had. Whether, and people can still argue that. One point I do want to make, and just based off some of the comments that continue to come in and year out, when permit recommendations come in, especially on general season deer, the fact of the matter is we have a mule deer management plan that we agreed to manage to for a 7-year period. And part of that is we're going to be proactive in decreasing permits when it's warranted. We have to accept the increases when it's warranted as well. That's part of that management plan. It was what we agreed to when it came up. It's something that, I think we've all committed to when it came through. It's something that we need to hold to. When it's warranted, we're seeing the proactiveness of the division with decreases. Pine Valley is a great example of that this year. To the flip side, the cache is in a lot better spot than Pine Valley is. And when an increase is warranted, we need to take advantage of that because we're not going to stockpile deer on a unit like the cache. If you look over history, it's probably every 4 to 5 years we have winter mortality and we lose those deer. So it's not like we can just hold on to them and hope that it keeps building better and better. So.
Is there any other comments from members of the RAC? Matt?
Yeah, so Matt Clark from Ogden here. I mean, I'm probably not the most popular person in the world right now after that fiasco in Salt Lake. But the point that I tried to make at that meeting was that this is our system. We need to follow our system. If this gets overturned in the legislature, fine. If this gets overturned in the courts, fine. But this is our system. And just to echo the previous comment, this is the plan. This is what we're supposed to do. We need to stick to the structure of our system. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. One of the comments, I guess, is as Troy from SFW addressed these 3 units. Is there can I ask if Colby might discuss those and hear his thoughts on those?
Yeah, it's the exact same thing that we just went over on the cache, right? And I've got the data if you want to see the data, but I can also talk you through it. And it's basically the permit adjustments that we're making this year in the southern region are because of previous year's adjustments, right? So on the beaver, for example, we're recommending a 200 permit decrease. Now, nobody's saying that deer are doing well on the beaver and it only warrants a 200 permit decrease. But if you look at that unit and you go back, bring it up really quick for myself. Not very far. I think we're at like 3,400 permits on that unit. And you can see there's an inflection point. We were at 3,350 permits in 2017. Last year, we were at 1,400. With that recommendation of 1,400, if you look at the graph, there's definitely an inflection point and you can see it heading back up. And I think the disagreement here is that our cut of 200 will get us back in the range, we feel, and we'll be okay. And any more than that, and we may overshoot, right? And that happens sometimes, but what we've been doing, we've been closer on most attempts than others. The Penguich Lake is an example of overshooting. We cut too much last year, and that's that increase you're seeing this year. And the Pavant, we've been at the middle of the objective for 2 years. With survival rates and the way things look, we can offer a few more permits there, and that's why we're recommending a small increase. So it's just using these same data that I just displayed on the cache. what's our buck doe ratio, what's coming into the population, what's the adult survival, how much, what can we recommend, and still be within the management plan parameters.
Okay. I'll let Kevin go and then Randy, I'll go after that. And then there was another comment.
Yeah, Cody, don't sit down. When in your presentation, you mentioned a number of hunting units, deer units that were going to be ended. You recommend that they end or be done away with because of low numbers, I guess. And maybe it was in.
That's probably the antlerless presentation.
Pardon?
That's probably the antlerless presentation.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, we closed a lot of antlerless hunts this year.
So my question is, if you say close, is that just a temporary closure? Does that eliminate that hunt forever, or what?
With antlerless hunts, we turn them off and on all the time, depending upon the situation. So yeah, doe deer, cow elk, a lot more fluctuation in antlerless hunts than there is in hunting of males, bucks and bulls.
Randy, I believe you had a comment.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I'm going to echo some of what's already been said. I think we've got some very good plans that have been put in place. There's some phenomenal data that's out there, and people just forget killing, harvesting bucks does not have a detrimental effect as long as you have enough bucks out on the landscape. I hope I get this number right, but in Kobe's presentation, I believe the doe pregnancy rate was 95%, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't know how you get higher than that. And Covey can chime in. I don't want to speak for him, but I'm very comfortable with the plans that are out there. As Matt was saying, I think this is our process, and I honestly think it's a good process. So I'm very pleased with the work the division's done and the recommendations they've made.
Did I miss? Was there another comment from over that direction? No. All right. I agree with the fact that there's a plan in place and that we want to stick to it. But I also want RAC members to recognize that that's also the purpose of this meeting. If we always just stuck to the plan and only did the plan and followed everything and never had anyone, why would we be here if we didn't have an opportunity to let people stress their opinions and talk to us? So I think we can still entertain. There are numbers that would still fit within the plan that may be different. So I just don't want to send a message that we're always just, it's the plan and we won't discuss or think things. We can still, that is the purpose of the meeting, for people to hear these comments and to share them with Covey and other members of the division. So just as we're looking at these numbers, I want RAC members to think about that as well. Covey, I have a comment and a question. As we're looking at opportunities, and that's been the big, a lot of the topic right now is that, obviously the number of permits versus the number of people who would like to obtain it and have a deer permit. They're not equal. I think I spoke earlier with Covey, and I believe in 2012, he had mentioned that at that time, anyone that wanted a deer permit that year was able to obtain one. Is that correct?
That's the last year. That was the last year where the demand was lower than the supply. Yeah.
Will you share with us this year, whatever the data is, at 2020 that you have that you could?
I can go back to last year. Yeah. So and what you're touching on really is why we push the biologists and push each other to offer the maximum permits we can and still maintain those plan ratios. And it's because if we don't, we just had a big discussion on point creep, and it seems pretty hypocritical to not to at least manage to the plan and then turn around and talk about how we change things in a major way to offer more permits, right? So that's why we push each other, is because there's another side to this, and that is that a lot of folks just want to hunt. And I've heard the saying a lot of the hardest part of killing a big bull in Utah is getting a tag. Right after you get the tag, you can go harvest a pretty good bull. And I would hate to get there with general season deer. The philosophy behind general season deer is hunting as often as we can at the quality we've agreed to, which is the postseason classification. So if you look at the data from where we are, this last year, 2021, only 49% of applicants that applied for a general season deer permit were successful. 51% were unsuccessful. Over half of those that applied to hunt deer in the state of Utah were unsuccessful. And that's, I'm looking at the graph right now, 2021. So again, this is year-old data. I don't have the 2022 data in yet, but that's about 150,000 applicants. If you look at the long-term trend, we've increased by about 7% a year. Some years it's less than that. This last year it was less. It took a big jump from 2020 to 2021, and then from 2021 to 2022, it wasn't as big. But if you look at those trends, you know, you're heading up to where in 10 years, 60% will be unsuccessful every year and 40% will be successful. And so as we manage deer, we can offer a lot more than we do through management, right? That's one of the changes we can make. Now we're going to manage to the plan. It's what we've agreed to. It's what we brought forward and took through the public process. But keep that in mind when we talk about increases and decreases, is that it affects hunters, right? We all want to kill a big buck, but you can't do that without a tag.
So the reason I asked that question, the other comment was just this is something that some conversations that I've had with friends, and I don't expect it to be in a form of emotion or anything to come up, but I would like the division or to possibly think about there's a hunt that goes on here on the Wasatch Front. We have our late season, you know, our extended archery season, and I think it gets used by a lot of people. It's very successful. It's a good opportunity for people. It works to help management to keep deer in the mountains. I would like to see the division think about having that being a hunt in itself. Right now, people to get that permit are purchasing permits, for instance, for probably the box elders, the most common, because it's relatively the easiest, or it is the easiest one to draw. A lot of them may be using that unit or other units in the state to obtain a deer permit, and then don't hunt that, so they can later use that permit to hunt the extended archery. Do you know how many people have hunted the extended archery? Or
It's
how
a
many
lot.
permits we use?
I can bring it up really quick. I've got it right here. That's actually a really fair point, though. Like looking at that as a separate unit is one of the things that we could do.
Just as Covey's pulling that up, we mentioned the comment about the doe harvest in the East Canyon unit. I think it was also referring to that same question you have. So this is something that came into through the public comment too.
Yeah. I missed that one.
I actually had that number earlier today and I'm struggling to find it.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, I think more than anything, it's just a thought. I think that there's a possible way to increase some more permits for people to obtain and still allow our archers and other people. There's just a way to provide more opportunity, I believe.
What I can say is that's inside the plan. We're able to do that. And it's actually one of the things we've considered. It hasn't come before the RACs and the public yet. And that's because we've had so much change in other areas. And sometimes you have to change at a rate that people can absorb. But yeah, I think that's something that definitely, I mean, what it would do is it would allow that opportunity while still freeing up some permits in some of these units where folks could draw and hunt there. And if what they really want to do is hunt the front, it seems like that would be an appropriate place to put them as an extended archery hunt. So it's something we would definitely be interested in looking into over the next year.
That was my thought. I feel like the archery hunters would still have an opportunity. They would still get to do what they love to do, but I'd like to see the numbers. I would bet that a majority of those who purchase those permits probably don't even venture out during the any of the general season hunts and wait, the 3 seasons and wait for that. So it's just something I'd like people to think about and maybe look at doing to provide more opportunity. All right. Is there any, are you still looking for that number then?
Yeah, I want to find it.
All right. Is there any, while we're waiting on Kobe, is there any other discussion or comments? Randy?
Got it.
Oh, we're not able to hear you, Randy.
That's why we hired Jayla.
Sorry.
You were on mute. There.
Yeah, I hit the wrong button. I was going to say why he was looking for that. I was just going to make a motion on the buck proposal as permitted or as presented.
Okay.
Are we to that point?
I'll give the number really quick because I got it. It's
Okay.
7,755 hunters that hunt extended archery.
Wow. I would have guessed there was 1,500. Wow. Way more than I anticipated. Yeah. Wow.
Good. A fair number of those come by my house all winter.
All right. I guess that might not surprise someone that lives on some of those or close to those areas. All right. All right. I think we're there. We had some discussion, but there was a pause. I think we've had a lot of discussion. We have a motion this time from Randy to accept the division's proposal as presented. Do I have a second? I have a second from Kevin. Any discussion on this motion before we call for a vote? All right. So we have a motion to accept as presented, a second by Kevin. I'll call for vote now. I'm going to go off my list right here so I can follow it in order, and we'll begin with Ryan Brown,
Yes.
Brad Buchanan,
Yes.
Jamie Butler.
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
and Nikki.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we'll now go to our next item on the agenda, which is the bull, elk, and buck pronghorn permit recommendations for 2022. We also have Covey here. Before we begin with questions, Covey, is there anything else that you may share apart from what was already presented on the video? Okay. I'll open up questions this time for the RAC for Colby. Kevin.
Kobe, in different units, the bulls are classified at a different age classification. Explain to me why.
So they're a different way to hunt bull elk, but sex ratio is more difficult in elk than it is in deer, right? Deer come down out into the open on the winter range, and bulls, when you're going to get an accurate sex ratio, is in September, and so the cover is just so much thicker when they come into the cows. So using that as a surrogate for quality is difficult, and instead Utah went with average age. We did that years ago. So if the average age of a unit, the higher the average age, it's really just a surrogate for the amount of quality on the landscape. You end up with more bulls on the landscape and higher quality on the landscape, the higher that average age of the animal is. And that's speaking in terms of, again, averages. But so on average, there's more quality on the higher average age. There's more bulls, right? So I feel like I'm saying the word average way too often. Bull elk usually grow to be about 320 inches, your Boone and Crockett score. That's the biggest they ever get. That's me, right? That's 5'8", super handsome, but never going to be.
I'm thinking more like a 280 bull myself.
So that's what bull elk get to be. So in order to have a 360, a 370, 380 bull, you've got to have the right nutrition on the landscape and enough bulls that somebody has the potential to be that bull, right? And if you don't have that, you probably won't ever grow that bull. The first 400-inch bull in the state of Utah ever killed was in 1998. Before that, it had never happened. 1998, things line up. It's on the Manti, and a gentleman harvests a 400-inch bull. And I mean, we have 100 years of reintroduction of elk in our state without that happening, right? So that's what average age is. It's just a surrogate for quality.
So, and I've been asked this question, so you basically do that to manage the quality of that unit, the quality of the animal, to make different units highly desirable or higher, more desirable than others. And if somebody wants that 400 class bull.
Yeah, if that's what you want, you have the ability, you can wait. Because in order to do that, you're really going to have to increase average age. You've really got to reduce harvest.
Kobe, do you know on these units, the hams units from last year, do you have an idea of what success rates were in general?
It varied a lot on the unit.
Okay.
It varied a lot. Yeah, that's a hard one for me to answer. We can pull up all the success rates, but
Is it safe to say it's lower success rates than neighboring limited entries?
yeah, but some of that is probably because the quality of the unit isn't as good.
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. I can't remember, and help me out on this one. It was either last year, Kobe, or the year before that completely changed. I know it's not in our region, but it's just an area of concern for me for the pronghorns down at Parker Mountain. Have you seen success with that strategy? You moved the permits to the outsides, trying to push them back into the plateau area.
We are starting to see some success where the plateau now is becoming the area of refugia again. And they're pronghorn down there. I think the last flight, they counted right around 1,000 or just a little bit more. So it is working. And it's one of those things that it'll probably take a few years and then we'll be able to hunt bucks again on the Parker.
Okay. So the numbers are building and they're coming back where they should be.
They're definitely coming back. They've experienced some drought too. So I don't know what population growth rate looks like. I don't want to say that their distribution is changing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Kobe, with the general season youth any bull elk hunts, proposed 500 permits. I looked, I don't believe that's set in the elk plan. It seems like it's been set at 500 for quite some time. Is there the ability to offer more opportunity on that? You hear a lot of people who put their kids in their entire span of youth years and never draw. I mean, is that?
I think the ability is there to offer more. Last time that we did that, so this proposal isn't new. This happened several years ago. This came forward. The Northeastern region had some concern. They take the majority of the hunters, and I actually have a little bit more concern now where we've overlapped an archery hunt with that hunt based on public feedback. I'm not saying we couldn't do it or shouldn't do it. We did commit to meet with the elk committee and discuss this issue, the archery hunt with the overlap with the youth any bull. And if you're asking me what I'd prefer, I would say I'd prefer to work through the elk committee with that and then possibly offer more opportunity in that in the future. But if it's something that the public really wants to see, there's nothing biological or no reason that it couldn't happen. It's more of a social issue.
Are there any other questions? I don't know. I have one, but it may be, I'm not sure whether to address it with the CWMU or on this, or maybe both. But in Utah, or in northern Utah up here, we have a unique situation where we have so many CWMUs and so much private property, and yet our elk numbers are high. We're over objective in northern Utah. Yet in a lot of our open or public areas that people are able to hunt on, the success rate isn't extremely high, and we feel like maybe a lot of the elk are on private property. Is there things being done to incentivize or to get the CWMUs or these private landowners to take more elk off of them? And again, that might go towards the CWMU, but I think it does affect a lot of what happens on our general season elk hunt in northern Utah.
Yeah, Justin, we've changed a lot of our strategies, based on the study that we conducted with BYU on the Wasatch that was recently published. And the study, what it showed was that you can have a lot of elk on a unit and have most of them become unavailable through hunting pressure, right? And it's just exactly what you're talking about. So one of the things we have done are like the private lands only permits and some of these things that the feedback we get sometimes is, well, those don't feel fair. And it's like, oh, I understand that perspective, but really it allows us to have more available elk when we do issue permits because we're pushing them back off. And for our private landowners, it allows them a tool to solve their problems and allows a lot of public on. And when a private landowner calls now and says, hey, I've got a depredation problem, I need somebody to get down here now and help handle this. When he knows he can call his neighbors and that they can harvest those animals or that his acquaintances or whoever, that's super helpful to them, and it redistributes those animals back to where they're wanted and desired. So that's one thing. There probably are a lot more, and a lot of this probably frankly does fit in the CWMU discussion. But because for those large areas that are CWMUs, the private lands only permits don't apply. So elk distribution's tough, man. It is. They are super smart. They feel pressure and they will definitely head towards sanctuary. So we're learning about it all the time. We know that some of these units that have elk above or at population objectives, we have collars on them. We're working to collar more to see how they behave when we start to hunt them and push them around. So we're trying to do a better job at this all the time, and it is a complex issue.
Another question?
Yeah, one more. It'd be easier if I just did this all at once, but can you, looks like the Wasatch, can you explain the shift in tags from the September hunts into that mid and late hunt? That seems like that's about the only unit we did that on. What's the reasoning there?
There was a couple, the Wasatch, I can't remember all the others, but it was as simple as the elk plan is 7 years old now. And on some of those, we didn't implement every strategy in the plan right out of the gate. We never do. But along the way, we implemented that mid-season hunt. The Wasatch specifically, we issue almost 1,000 permits. And there was issues with crowding in that early September rifle hunt and some of the late hunt, some of the others. And so we changed the distribution there. This last year, we built a new database to store data. When we did it, we put the splits back to the original plan and had the discussion of, okay, do we still have the same reason to deviate from the plan splits? You can deviate from the splits of where you allocate permits by weapon type if you have a reason. And we just realized those reasons had gone away because now we have a mid-season hunt. We have these other things. And so we just redid the allocation as to what it was. And if reasons arise, that's really, again, primarily a social issue. We're not saying we wouldn't deviate or move things around again, but we didn't have the same reason as we did when we did it.
Okay, if there are no other questions from the RAC, members of the RAC, I'll ask for some questions. Is there any questions from members of the public that are here for Colby? All right, I'll turn some time over to Ben now to give us the public comment survey results.
Okay, of the 19 commenters, we had 16 that provided comments on this specific item. There were just a few comments in addition to their opinion of agree or disagree. Some were related to wishing for fewer tags and more limited entry permits to reduce the time it takes to draw a permit. We've had a little bit of discussion there. There was one comment that came from someone who lives in the northern region, but was commenting on a northeastern region issue for the North Slope Daggett. So I referred that one to Miles Hamburg in the Northeast region. So I think they'll take that one up there. There was some concern expressed about the overlap of general season and limited entry units in area and in time, but they weren't specific as to where that occurred. Just expressed frustrations with general season hunters pushing around the limited entry hunters. And someone that disagreed with the unlimited youth permits for elk. That's it.
All right. We'll now go to we got our comments from public. I've got here, the first card I have is Kevin Norman.
I hate speaking in church, so I'm going to stand over here. Kevin Norman representing SFW. Two things. We want to classify Covey as a raghorn. And second, we support the division's recommendations on this item. Thanks.
I was a little kinder or more kind. All right. That's all the public comments we have. I'll open now for the RAC for discussion and comments. Jamie.
I don't know what a raghorn is.
It's an immature,
very immature
bull. Yeah, and my directors, my director sent me a text that said that I was short but with a lot of mass.
Jamie, if you're a trophy hunter, a raghorn is a small, younger, not desirable animal to some, to most.
I got it from the tone, but I just wanted to hear your explanation.
I just want to say thank you to Jamie and Nikki for the work you guys are putting in to get up to speed on this stuff. You guys are asking questions that maybe to some are obvious, but these are new things for our non-consumptive reps on the RAC. We've got 2 new ones all at the same time, and I just want to give you guys kudos for the amount of homework and questions you guys are asking offline as well to get up to speed. I'm really impressed with the work you're doing, so thanks.
Definitely. All right. More discussion or comments?
Brad, I did look up the success rates on those hams hunts if you're still interested in them. Yeah, so it looks like the low end was 37%, and that was on the Plateau Barney top. And the high end, the highest success was 66%, and that was the box elder sawtooth, the hams portion of that hunt. Interestingly enough, if you look at the September archery, because those hunts were companioned with a September archery hunt on that same box elder sawtooth, that was 0% success. And it was the low, with the high being on the Southwest Desert. That was 100%. So varied.
Okay, thank you.
Emily.
I don't want to get too far into this because it will probably come up later for the CWMUs. But Covey, just a go back to that paper that was published recently that you were on, for elk using private lands as a refuge. I'm curious what the division's ideas are on how to help facilitate relieving some of that pressure by allowing more hunting, right? Like, is the division having those discussions right now? And again, this might be more appropriate later, but I just want to throw it out there right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. We have those discussions all the time as to how we're going to address this, or how we address this on areas with a lot of refugia. And one of the ways is just seeing, you start with, well, the Wasatch, we did the study on the Wasatch. So coming back to that, we know we've got to hunt that population again. We're up against the population objective. And so there we plan to put on a bunch of collars. And then as we hunt that unit, we'll probably create our own areas of refugia inside the unit on public land, right? So the hunt will go, but you draw a line around a basin and say, all right, we're not going to hunt cows in this basin. So we redistribute those animals and create our own areas of refugia. And then through the years, we would change those around. So they're not always the same area, or there's no place that's completely comfortable. I think with the CWU program, we'd probably look at doing something very similar, because not all CWUs are the same. Not all the cows are equitably distributed across all the private land. And so working with those CWUs to apply pressure in areas where we have the surplus, and pull back pressure in areas where we don't, to get them to redistribute, because we have the season length to do it. You can harvest a cow elk on a CWU from August 1st to January 31st. And so that would be, it's just applying pressure, watching how they move, creating areas of refugia where we're not hunting, and then working with private landowners to then apply pressure when they come on, or hunt them that way. Sounds super easy. It's way more complicated to employ. So
It doesn't sound easy. The Wasatch doesn't have a lot of BLM land surrounding it, but in other areas, well, we're obviously happy to work with you on that.
Sure.
It's a great idea.
be great. We'd love it.
This is a comment discussion. So I know that our elk management plan is coming open and meetings are beginning. How does the public, if they want some input to those who are, is there a way for them to reach out to those members that are on that elk committee and to share their ideas?
Absolutely. If any member of the public reaches out to me, I'll redirect them to the constituent on the committee that represents them. And so if anybody has questions and wants to, the committee, I put all the committee members' names up, but I'll give them their contact info and let them contact them. And as a committee member, everybody who is a committee member understood that's part of the deal. Like they're a volunteer public servant, so you're welcome.
We have one on my right over here that we're looking forward to having him on there. So Brad has been asked to sit on that elk management committee. And I think we've had a lot of information that's come out since the last time that was open, with all these studies and everything that's going on. And I think that they're going to have an opportunity to make a lot of good changes and some things that can really help both our elk herds and also sportsmen who want that opportunity to also to hunt them. So I just wanted people to know that the elk committee is open right now. Those meetings are beginning and that you can give input there.
First meeting's tomorrow. So every RAC gets a representative, and Brad worked with Brad. Brad's a representative for the Northern Region RAC. So anything you want to funnel through him, feel free.
All right. Is there any more discussion or any more comments or anything? All right, now would be the time that we could entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the division's proposal as presented.
So we have a motion by Brad to accept the division's proposal as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Ryan Brown. All right. Do we have any discussion on the proposal or on the motion? Sorry. All right. If not, I'll call for a vote. Ryan Brown.
Yes.
Brad Buchanan.
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
and Nikki.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. I think we'll now go to, we good? I think we're going. We'll now go to our next item on the agenda. And the way that Covey's still standing here, I'm guessing we have to hear from him again instead of Riley. So this agenda item is once in a lifetime permit recommendations for 2022. Again, I hope everyone had the opportunity to watch the presentation, and members of the RAC, now would be your time to ask questions. I'd also give Covey the opportunity, if there's anything in addition to what's been shared, if he has some time to do that as well. Covey, anything from you?
Sorry, Justin, I'm good.
Okay. All right, for members of the RAC, do we have any questions concerning these items? We received I guess we'll wait till the comment periods. Let's go ahead and do that. So no questions. Wow. All right, we have one public comment. This time we'll ask Troy Justinson to come forward.
Troy Justinson, Sportsman, Fish and Wildlife. We support the division's recommendation with two exceptions. And the first one is that of Jack Crick. The division's recommendation is 3 ram tags. We'd ask that this rack go with 2. Those of you familiar with Jack Crick, it's very limited in access and actually is one of probably our top trophy bighorn units in the state. Had the opportunity to sit on the sheep committee, and we gave the division some wide sideboards to have a wide range of permit recommendations within that. And the whole idea is giving them those wide sideboards is some of the units we'd manage for a lot of opportunity, but yet have the ability to manage some of these for higher quality. And that is our fare with the Jack Crick. 3 permits is a lot of permits there. It puts a lot of people on there. You hear 3 and you think, well, wait a minute, that's not that many. But then you add the auction tag, generally the statewide tag usually will at least hunt in that unit. You have an auction tag for it. There's also a tribal tag that is in there. It puts a lot of pressure on it. This particular sheep unit hasn't been flown since 2019. In 2019, the herd was actually doing pretty good, but the last few years out there, it's extremely difficult. I've hunted it with friends. I spent quite a bit of time on it. I would feel more comfortable with 2 permits. Next up, it would be the Oak Creeks on your limited entry deer. Our committee there has asked that we keep those permits the same as they were last year. Thank you.
All right. That was the last public comment card that we have. So we'll now open up for discussion on the item. It looks like, Matt, you have a comment?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I failed to have, if that's all, I'll have Ben give us a public comment on this first, Matt.
Sorry, Matt, I'll make it quick. It's pretty quick. We had 10 respondents out of the 19. 4 said they neither agree nor disagree. 3 said they somewhat agree. 3 strongly agreed with the recommendation. The only comment that was made was there was just a question, Covey, about what are the impacts of drought at high elevation for these species. Thank you.
We'll let Covey address that question that come up and then go to you, Matt.
We don't know what all the impacts are, but we know they're there. We've seen mountain goat populations decline through this drought as well, and harvest alone doesn't explain it. So the I mean, when you say at these elevations, I assume you primarily mean mountain goats, right? They're some of the hardest species we have to study because of where they live, remote areas. A lot of times it's wilderness. A lot of times, yeah, the capture and collaring effort itself is dangerous. But we've worked hard the last couple of years on the units we can. We've gotten out collars, and now we're working to recover those collars, even if it takes helicopter time to go get it. We'll go get it so that we can start to determine cause-specific mortality and see what some of those impacts are. So, you know, it's kind of funny. It's probably where we were with deer 15 or 20 years ago, arguing about what we think from our observations. We think this, but we also, in the dead of winter in the Uintas, just had a mountain lion, maybe more than one mountain lion, but had 2 goats killed, and they were both mountain lions. So we don't know. We don't have all the answers on this one. We know there are impacts. It appears to be drought, and we're conducting a collaring effort to find out exactly what it is.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, so I would ask Covey to comment on Troy's last comment about dropping the sheep tag from 3 to 2. These things come up, and the RAC members are kind of like just hit out of the blue. I mean, we haven't been able to research this. We don't really have a good way to like make a decision. So I'm hoping Covey can inform us a little bit on this issue.
Sure, I think I actually can. Like, this is, so Troy's right. When we wrote the statewide sheep plan, we left some pretty wide parameters. And the reason why is because some units have extremely high potential for disease. And the more, especially younger rams you have on a unit, the more they wander. And when they wander, there's a chance for contact and getting disease. And so a lot of the Rocky units we manage at that high end of the range to reduce the number of rams on the landscape and end up with fewer potential disease events. I think it's probably a fair ask. We recommended 3. I think that's a good recommendation. I also think that I understand the recommendation for 2. It's not outside the plan parameters. And it's understandable that maintaining more quality in one of these units where we manage so many for more opportunity it's a fair ask. So it's not outside of the plan.
So is it true that there are way more people than these 3 or 2 tags on there? Are the governor's tags, the auction tags? I mean, they're like a consolidation of people that are just hitting this unit?
It's true that those tags tend to head towards the units that have more quality. And often I think they are harvested in that area. Yes. I mean, it has passed around. I know over the years we've harvested one on the Nebo, one on the Wasatch, but I think that's a very fair statement as well. Yeah.
So dropping this from 3 to 2 would be a fair thing to do.
It doesn't concern me. I mean, and I think that what I want to point out is I don't think the region made a bad recommendation either, because there are other things that they consider too, and that is the draw odds for these units. But if you're hunting sheep and you're putting in for sheep, I guess you know it's going to take a little while, right? So, yep, we manage a lot of units towards the opportunity end, and I understand the sentiment for some sportsmen on this one to manage a little more on the quality end, and 2's not outside of the plan.
So my comment, I understand the concern that there's a possibility. So if we had 3 public hunters that are the draw, we have our sportsman hunter come in there, we have our governor's, our statewide tag go in there. We have an Indian reservation tag, I think, that comes there if I remember. And then also there's a conservation permit. I just hate taking the permit from the public average guy. If there was a way to limit hunting on there, I don't know if it's I would rather not take a permit out of the public draw and say, how do we not punish the public, or how could we, is there any way to try to limit or disperse the hunting on that without, because it seems like to me the only way that we can do this is taking away from the average guy.
We could ask them pretty please, I guess.
Well, I'm saying, can we say the state hunter can hunt it one year and the governor's tag the other year or something like that?
No, we're never doing that again. We did that once and it did not work out
Well,
well.
just don't let people
So-
answer the phone that aren't supposed to. But
So, I think that those tags are valuable too. It's a hard balance. And really, I think we have increased, if you look back in history, we've increased a lot of Rocky tags under this plan that allows for that. We've increased a lot. Almost every year we've come with a pretty good increase. So it's been a good plan and it's a good thing. We're offering a lot of opportunity in sheep. You're still going to have to wait a while if you want to hunt sheep.
sorry, Matt, I didn't see that. Thanks.
I guess I'm just really torn on this question. I mean, like, you're taking away a public hunter's tag. And this, I mean, this is getting kind of out in the weeds a little bit, but there was that big bull that was killed in the cache on Winter Range on a like governor's type tag. And that's really not in our agenda to address those sorts of things. I guess the question would be, are we ever going to have a chance to address those? Like, can we limit these governor's tags, these auction tags, because that really seems to be the problem. It's not the draw tags. It's like everybody that gets a governor's tag, they're just like going to these units and like hammering them, and they're able to hammer them for like 6 months out of the year. Like, I don't know that we can really address that now, but that would be a concern that I would voice, is that this seems to come up every year. There's somebody that's got a sportsman's tag or a governor's tag or an auction tag that does something that's probably not the best thing to do for our public image.
All right, I think that's something that we can think about. It's, I think those permits are great. They really do a lot for those units. That gives, but they do complicate some of the management areas, especially not so much maybe on our deer and elk, but they do affect on some of our once in a lifetime where permits and tag numbers are limited. So I think we can consider that. You know, you can think about that as a RAC as we prepare to make any type of motion, or if we're good with that, that's fine too, but that's just something to think about.
Justin,
Yes.
can Kobe, maybe you can help answer this. I've heard in other discussions, the migratory nature of that herd. There's a smaller resident herd, and then we get migration off the reservation. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that at any one time they could be available or unavailable depending upon where they are on the unit, right? Because you're right there on the boundary. And so there are sheep that come off the Ute Indian Reservation. There are sheep that live on the state of Utah side, and they could be in, out, or on one or the other. And so it's another complication.
All right. We also, Mike, I guess, we received a call from the Utah Archery Association that weren't able to come up north, but one of the concerns they had was on the Central Mountain Goat Archery tag. Right now, the division has proposed that there would be, let me get this right, there would be one permit, which what their concern is when there is one permit, help me if I get this right, they want to add one more to the bonus draw so that it's not, so that those with points or those with the higher points would have the opportunity to draw it, and then there would still be the other tag that wouldn't go to the high point holder. What are your thoughts on that? And hopefully I described that well enough.
Yeah, I understand both sides on this. The rationale, obviously, to offer 2 permits to be able to have one in the bonus pool. And the region cut those permits because they have some concern. There hasn't been very much differential success. When these were proposed, it was based on differential success between archery and any weapon. And the truth is, probably need to look at maybe timing or season dates. For bison this last year, when we put the Henry Mountains archery hunt in January, that worked. So if you put it at the right time, probably could have some differential success. Is one additional permit going to be the end of the world? No. And on this unit, but we do have some concerns on this unit. So if that were the recommendation of the RAC, we'd definitely take it under advisement.
All right. I think for our non-consumptive, for our two, Kobe, you're up at the mic and you're going to explain that better. I know Lindy's not here, but I guess for people on the RAC that don't understand that, maybe Kobe would explain how quickly. I'm going to put it on you to.
Sure. So in our limited entry and once in a lifetime system, the permits are split. 50% go to random draw for every applicant that put in, and the other 50% are awarded to the top point holders. To award those have been putting in year after year after year, waiting for that permit and trying to address that. So if you wait, you can have a permit, or if you get lucky, you can have a permit. If there's only one, it goes to the folks that get lucky.
Yeah. All right. That help?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Any other comments or discussion on this agenda item? Is there anyone daring or willing to make a motion?
I will. I'll make a motion that we accept the division's proposal with the exception of 9 Mile Jack Creek being reduced to 2 tags.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion to accept the division's proposal as presented with the exception of dropping the number of permits on the 9 Mile Jack Creek permit, our hunt, to 2 in place of 3. And we have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Matt?
I think that's fair to do for this year. Again, I don't think that that's necessarily needs to fall on the public draw people. I think this needs to fall on all these conservation tags that are awarded because they're just glumming on to this unit. You know, we need to have public support for the conservation tags, the governor's tags. And if they are causing public draw tags to go down over time, I think we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. So I'm willing to do this for now, but I would really like to have an agenda item on a future RAC meeting where we discuss the parameters of these auction tags.
I think that's a great comment. I would agree with that. Okay, is there any other discussion before I call for a vote?
Yeah. Do you want to take into consideration the Utah Archery Association's request? Do you want to include that, Brad? That's Brad's call. I would second that too.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. If there would be a friendly amendment that would like to change it, that's fine. If he doesn't feel comfortable with that, we'll keep the motion on the table.
I'm going to be honest. I'm not necessarily a fan of changing it for draw odds, just personally.
Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second then. I'll call for a vote. Ryan?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
And Nikki?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. All right. I noticed that there was just a question from Randy before we go to the next, or a comment from Randy before we go to the next item.
Yeah, super quick comment. And I say this almost every meeting. If there's organizations or people that have things that want to be presented or want the RAC to consider, I strongly recommend that they get those to us in advance. A phone call to somebody doesn't do it. That doesn't give us the time to look at what they're actually talking about. They may have legitimate points, but you've got to give us time to think about it at least. So just want to throw it out there.
That's a good comment. I agree. It does help when we get information in letters prior to the meeting to be able to look over them.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Also a bit of housekeeping. I think that comment's taken to note. We'll work on that with our partners there. I think there's a lot of buildup with a lot of meetings and that end up in the fulfillment committee. So there's a ton of movement around the state and it kind of comes together all really quick. So I think that there's an honest reason for it, but we'll work on that. Randy, you're right. The other thing, just before we move on, since it came up during this item, the SFW comment also included a recommendation that would have actually pertained to the buck deer permit recommendations for 2022. It's up to you guys if you want to take it up. I just wanted to remind you that the Fillmore Oak Creek limited entry deer recommendation to keep it the same as 2021, which would be to keep it at 40 rather than the division's recommendation of 44. I just wanted to point it out that it came up in that last item. We can go back and address it or not. It's up to the RAC.
I didn't hear any discussion or concerns about it. Is there anyone else that wants to address it? Matt.
Well, again, this is the same deal with the sheep recommendation. I mean, we're put on the spot. We don't have time to research this. We don't have time to talk to anybody. These recommendations need to come to us earlier, so we have time to like intelligently address them.
I think that probably is a disadvantage to the northern and the central RAC is our first two. It does help the other RACs after it. Meetings probably have a little more time to discuss that. So I think, again, I agree with that we could try to get it out to everyone prior to the meeting. I do know we did receive a letter last night from SFW, which was grateful that helped, but yeah, a little more time would definitely help. All right. Are we good with where we're at to the meeting right now? Okay. We're going to go ahead and go to the agenda item number 8, the antlerless permit recommendations for 2022. Again, we have Covey. Once again, we've had the opportunity to watch the presentation. Now is your time for the RAC to, if they have any questions for Covey concerning this agenda item, I invite you to ask those questions now. Kevin?
Covey, on the cash antlerless, the herd objective is 2,300. Your estimation is 3,350. And yet you went from 730 tags to 710. I'm just curious of why.
Dave, do you want to come up and speak to that?
Yeah, so we're pretty saturated on the cache with the number of permits that we currently have. And so the permits that we cut are super, super low success. But we want a presence on the mountain, but we didn't want to just have so many hunters out there not experiencing success. So it's up on the north part of the cache. And we've had a lot of depredation issues in the past, and tags have helped with that. So we cut some permits out of those. Essentially, we're not really cutting harvest down, just a few permit numbers, just keep a presence in that area.
Simply without you hit the point of diminishing returns.
So yeah, I understand that it's got more to do with too many hunters saturated in an area, because certainly the herd shows a large increase. And I just wondered why we wouldn't want to knock those down and control them a little bit.
Right, it does show an increase, but there is a point of diminishing returns. Our success rates have been decreasing. And we did put some private lands only permits out to try to help with that, but there's a lot of permits on the unit right now, so.
Kobe, can you just speak to the, I guess, logic between, behind the antlerless deer hunts, where they're focused and why we offer them when we're under objective on so many units?
Absolutely. So the antlerless deer hunts are focused usually, well, right now especially, they're focused around areas where we're going to have to come in and solve a conflict or a problem. And we focus them at times where we have resident animals that aren't impacting populations that are available to hunters, right? So you look at the hunts around the state and they're focused on non-migratory animals. They're focused in highly focused areas. There is an antlerless hunt that issues quite a few permits out in Mighton, and that one's to address a CWD issue. So all of the antlers hunts have a specific issue or topic they're trying to address. It's not harvesting animals to try to reduce a population. It's try to surgically impact an issue we have. And just to be very frank, when it's a conflict with depredation or private landowners, the division is directed in code to alleviate that damage. So somebody's going to have to help mitigate or alleviate that damage. I said this at Central Region RAC, and I probably should say it again. What we found is that if there's an area where sportsmen are really passionate and they'd like to see those animals not get harvested, the most success I've ever seen is when the sportsman will directly interact with landowners and help them solve their problems, help them work through whatever those issues may be. And if you reach out to us, yeah, we can get you in contact with who they are and help work through some of those issues. But we're going to do what we're directed to do in code, and that is alleviate the damage. And we'd rather give some of that opportunity back to the public than have to do it ourselves. Is that fair?
Any other questions? Members of the RAC? Do we have any questions from the public? All two of you, three of you. All right. I'll turn some time over to Ben right now to go over the public comment survey.
This will be quick. We had 13 out of the 19 provide comments on this item. 25%, or sorry, let's see, just over 8% strongly agreed, 25% somewhat agreed, 25% neither agreed nor disagree, 16.7% somewhat disagree, 25% strongly disagree. The only comment that came in that was written, I think you brought it up earlier, Mr. Chair, regarding killing elk on the private lands on CWMUs. So that's probably something we can talk about later too, if it hasn't already been addressed enough. Thanks.
Okay. We're going to go to public comment, and part of me wants to ask Troy to come up instead of Kevin, since he walked up and assumed he was next. But well, you got pretty good odds. All right, we'll go to public comment, and Kevin Norman.
Kevin Norman, representing SFW. We support the division's recommendations with the exception of the Pine Valley. Don't want to see any doe hunts at this time on the Pine Valley. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Next one, Troy Justinson.
Troy Justinson representing myself. I support SFW's recommendation with the division's recommendation of everything except that of harvesting does off the Pine Valley. Once again, this is just in support of our local committees down there and the guys, and we understand where the division's coming from, and we're going to take that advice and actually reach out to the individual landowners to see if we can get that resolved. One thing I want to clarify though on the last thing, our recommendation at County Unit 2 was in no way, shape, or form to benefit the auction tag hunters or the sports or the governor's tag. Case in point, the biggest rams to be killed on that unit have all been killed by the average guys. You know, our concern was to protect the quality for everybody there. I would dare say that 90% of the biggest rams there were killed by the average guys. And by no way, shape, or form, please don't misconstrue my comments to protect that for the high money guys. It was not. It was to preserve the quality for everybody. One of our chapter, Kenny Davis from Cedar City, down to the last week of hunt, asked for some help. We helped him out. He kills a 191-inch ram. But then again, 2 years ago, I'd take a personal friend out who drew that tag, waited 26 years. I spent 28 days on that unit. You could have counted the rams on one hand that we seen. He had one opportunity. Didn't kill ram. Went home empty-handed. So, but anyway, so please don't take that wrong. Then also, you know, Matt, I understand what you're saying at the last minute, but in all honesty, like Ben pointed out, this goes through a brown bag session. We meet with the division generally the week prior to the RACs. And so by the time we get to our fulfillment committees to come up with a position, it's literally days before we're standing in front of you. So we apologize that we don't have those recommendations to you sooner. But that's what this process really is. I know you're not going to be able to spend all the time and effort into researching it, but the best you can, you ask the experts, you listen to our input, and then you form the best decision you can. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Troy, for clarifying. And I think at least how I looked at it, I agreed that I don't think it had anything to do with trying to provide for the money tags or anything like that. I get that we're trying to preserve the quality and the herd that's there. So that was my comment, was just is there a way to rotate that permit where maybe we don't necessarily take it away from the public, but we could try to do that. But thanks for sharing that. I'm going to do my best really quick to address what Troy mentioned. Again, I think it's a part of the product is we're one of the first meetings, you know, us in the central right off the bat, and then there's a little bit of a break for when they get these things to us. But when SFW and our archery association and when any of these guys, these representatives come up to share, I think that's important that the RAC members and public recognize that when Troy or when Ben Lauder or whoever's over those organizations comes up, it's not just their thoughts. They bring these things up before all of their committees. They have meetings, they have discussions, and I'm positive that multiple times Troy's been up here and presented what was voted by, you know, SFW's members, or I'm sure Ben or other members of these other organizations stand up and share what their members have voted for, and they don't always agree with it, but they all agree with it, that if the majority of their members support something, that they come and do that. And so I get why they're trying to gather information. They're trying to get the information to us as quick as they can. And so that is part of us being one of the first two meetings. It happens fast.
I know we're on Atlas, Mr. Chair, but I feel like everybody else has got to talk. So I'd like to say just a couple things really quickly. And I know that everybody's excited to hear from me again. So two things. One, we meet with any group that wants to meet with us, but we wait until the RAC packet's out. And so we probably put some of these groups in this situation, not giving them a lot of time. But if any group contacts the Division of Wildlife and says, we want to sit down with you and discuss recommendations, our answer is absolutely. And we're going to do it after the RAC packet is out so that everybody's on the same foot. And then the other one is, in terms that we're talking about, there are a few statewide tags, but I feel like I need to mention this for some reason, but there's, for every statewide tag that is for auction, for every governor's tag, there is a sportsman's tag, right? And so a sportsman's tag is a special draw that's equivalent to the governor's tag, and it's a statewide tag. It's really, really cool thing because anybody can draw this tag that's of immense value. You have extremely long season dates all across the state. You can hunt wherever you want. And so I just want to keep in perspective. Yes, the auction tags, they're important to wildlife conservation. We appreciate those, but there's also a fairness where we allocate one of these to the public as well, where anybody can have it. So I don't know if I did a good job at protecting those tags before when I was asked. And I do think that it's very few permits. I don't want to start limiting where they can hunt. I don't want to start limiting that draw for the sportsman's tag or the governor's tag. And really, it's a pretty cool thing that anybody could draw one of those. You know, it's not all just, I think we get this idea in our head that it's just a big money tag that can hunt wherever they want. That's not the case. There's a draw tag that can do that too. And 90% of that big money tag goes back to wildlife conservation. And probably more than that if we're honest. So.
Yes, Nikki.
Darren has reminded me that I've been far too quiet this evening.
Especially from last.
I told him I did a lot more research this time. So thanks to Jim Christensen and to Ben for answering my multitude of questions. I have a whole bunch more that I've been writing down, but I'll save those for outside the meeting. So I just had 2 questions / comments. So I think I understand where you guys are coming from as far as like us having information in a more timely manner. I think the other flip side of that is I didn't receive anything from them, so I don't even know what's actually happening. And so maybe that's the other piece of that, is that instead of sending their comments or suggestions or recommendations to a few members on the RAC that they know, that it goes to the full RAC, and maybe that gives us time to reach out to them and ask questions if we have them. And I think that could be really useful. So that's one comment. And then the second is, I'm wondering, Covey, can you talk a little bit about the recommendation for not allowing the doe hunt that they were suggesting? I'm just curious what that would mean for the population or the hunt generally.
Okay. So those hunts are in and around some depredation areas, small, localized, to alleviate some damage. We would rather offer those permits to the public than give them as depredation vouchers to the landowner, or remove the animals ourselves. And so that's what those hunts are. They're lower elevation, non-migratory deer, August 1st to August 17th. And so, you know, if they were later in the year, we'd obviously be more concerned. It's not that there's not concern for the deer on the Pine Valley. We understand that population has struggled through the drought. But this is addressing an issue with a specific non-migratory group of deer on 2 parts of the unit.
Covey, I think I can answer that other issue of you not receiving the email. I think again, it's an honest thing. We all want to ignore emails that come from Kevin Norman.
I haven't even met Kevin Norman.
Exactly. So if you look under Kevin Norman and you'll see it,
It was on there. Your name's on. Your email's on there.
Oh, maybe it went to my spam.
It's on trash, probably.
I will check that for sure.
Yeah.
It's a RAC more.
You're a good judge of character.
Yeah. I feel like Kevin and I are going to be great friends. I have no issues whatsoever with Kevin.
You really don't know him.
Really tough group. I don't want to get on anyone's bad side on this team. No, that's helpful. Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm happy to get information just a few days ahead of time, because I understand the constraints that come from where they're coming from. And I really appreciate their expertise and experience. So I will pay much closer attention to all my mail prior to this meeting.
I can do a better job too, because I think these recommendations came up last night too in the central region. So I can connect those dots between last night and tonight too better. So good banter about it. We'll get it right. Thanks.
I've got Jamie and then Emily.
I was just going to say it was my email that classified Kevin as trash. So check your trash. I hope we're good friends too, Kevin.
I don't know how to follow that comment, but I'm going to be the devil's advocate on the other side of that. We're all really busy. This is kind of piggybacking off of what Troy said, that I think it's okay if some of these recommendations don't come until this meeting, as much as I would love time. to research everything and dig into it. I know me personally, I haven't had any time this week, so it doesn't really matter. And it is our job to have this public forum and a discussion here. And so if that's having this discussion and asking these questions to Covey, getting to see him over and over, that's fine in these meetings. So I say, even if the recommendations come at the RAC, bring them on.
Kevin. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, Kevin. Yes, sorry.
It wasn't a long time ago, but there were a few years ago that I got sideways with Troy and Kevin on some issues. And it had to do with really not being able to go over this information before the meeting. I just felt like, and we talked and we worked it out. And believe me, this is the first meeting for a long time that I felt like the information wasn't there in time for us to really be able to review it. Now I understand why, but this is something that's come up before. It's been worked on. They'll continue to work on it, and I think I'm back on at least some of a positive side. Maybe not with Kevin at this point, but anyway, thanks.
Paul.
Just wanted to ask Covey to clarify on the Pine Valley doe permits. Sounds like those are going to be harvested one way or another, whether it's through the public or through depredation tags. Is that correct?
They're in an area where we've been asked to alleviate the damage, and we will alleviate the damage.
That was quite the answer.
I'd rather give this opportunity to the public. They're probably going to have to shoot some deer in the area.
That's why they
That is a cryptic raghorn right there.
Okay. Are there any other comments, questions, or discussion before we entertain any motions? All right. Is there anyone that'd like to make a motion?
I'll move that we accept the proposals as presented.
So I have a motion from Randy to accept the division's proposal as presented. Do I have a second? Paul, I have a second by Paul. Or was that a question?
I'll second it.
All right. That's what I thought. Okay. So we have a motion on the table by Randy to accept the division's proposal as presented, and a second by Paul. Any discussion before I call for a vote? All right. We'll begin with Ryan Brown.
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
Jamie.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Randy.
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Darren.
Yes.
And Nikki.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank
Finally
you.
done with Colby. All right. Thank you, Colby, for spending all that time. We appreciate it. We'll now go to agenda item number 9, which is the 2022 CWMU antlerless permit recommendations. And we'll have Chad Wilson, who is the private lands and public wildlife coordinator. So again, I hope everyone's had the opportunity to watch these presentations. Now is your time. If you have questions, that you can address them with Chad. Also, I give Chad the opportunity, if there's anything that he would like to add to anything that's already been presented, I would say at this time we'd allow him to do that. Is there anything more that you'd like to add?
I would, but Dave Smedley told me he's getting hungry, so we'll just go to the questions.
All right. Do we have any questions here for Chad from members of the RAC? So go ahead.
I know it's come up before. It's going to continue to come up because I know there's issues there, but Morgan, South Rich, East Canyon, Chalk Creek, obviously over objectives, some significantly. You mentioned last night some work with the CWMU committee. I guess, do we have ideas going forward and ways to improve, I guess, our cooperation in harvesting more cows on these units? I mean, this is 200% of objective on one of these units is pretty significant.
Yeah, it is. And to answer your question, yes. And having been through being a biologist and now under the coordinator and working with these people, I think we can get there. But we're going to open up the rule as well this summer. That's in my mind, after the conversation last night, I think that is the place to address this. And there's ideas that would flesh out through that, through a committee in that, when that rule is open, to see where we land on that.
Right. I'll wait for a comment, I guess, on this one. I think that was a question that I had. Any other questions on them from members of the RAC? Questions from members of the public? Jayla's coming up. Yes, please.
So I've been having meetings with a lot of the CWMU operators on the unit that you're talking about. And everybody's in agreement that we have too many elk. It's figuring out where the elk are during hunting season and how we take those numbers back. There's been lots of discussion on how elk move to refugia areas. And now that we have some callers out on the unit, I think that will be very telling as to where these elk are going to be at during those time, like between August and January or January 31st, when we can actually harvest them. So.
Thank you. That's why we stole her from the central unit and brought her here.
I appreciate that.
That's
I
why
was
we're-
on the
that's why we're
classification
better.
with her last week. She said she was going to fix all this soon.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the public? All right, I'll turn time over to Ben to share with us the input from our public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For this item, we had 9 out of 19 provide comments. A little over half at 55%, neither agreed nor disagreed. 22% somewhat agreed, 11% strongly agreed, 11% strongly disagreed, 0 somewhat disagree. So kind of a neutral / agree stance from most of them. The only thing that was pointed out was there was just a recommendation to increase all CWMU units by 1 cow tag. But other than that, everything else, as it relates to depredation and trouble spots and stuff, that has been discussed tonight already. Thanks.
Thank you. Having heard that, we'll now go into our public comment. And we have one public comment, and this is from Gary Webb, who is part of the CWMU Association. And we're grateful to have him here. And we may have him stay up a little bit, and maybe he can educate us some as well, if there's questions.
I'm not the one that's the educator. Yeah, Gary Webb, I represent the association. We support the division's recommendation. We're here on behalf of the members of the association. And going through COVID, we haven't been to all of the RAC meetings. The association representation hasn't been here. I think learning from COVID, realizing it's important to be at these meetings, you're going to see a much bigger presence from the association at the meetings. On a positive note, I was talking to Chad back there, and it's incredible the amount of CWMUs that are in this region. There are 76 CWMUs in this region. 58% of all the CWMUs in the state are here in this region. The CWMU program is a cooperative unit. It's a cooperative program with the state, with the public. And I know that the operators are working with the biologists in those specific areas to address the antlerless need. But the cooperation in general, we have a great relationship with the Division of Wildlife. The public hunters, by and large, that hunt on the CWMUs, They love their hunts. We track the success rates. We track the satisfaction rates. They're over 4 stars currently. Just last year alone, there were, if you include the antlerless hunts, there were more than 1,500 draw tags in the state of Utah, all because of the CWMU program and these landowners that are allowing hunting on their property. The CWMU program is 2.3 million acres of land. I mean, it is a giant cooperative program, and there are benefits to everybody that participate in the program: the landowners, the public, the state tag hunters, private hunters. So we're here in the spirit of cooperation. I can make myself available after the meetings. This probably isn't the forum for question and answer, but we can communicate via email. We would love to be more involved. We will be more involved. And the overview of the program is just what I said. It is a giant program in the state. There is a huge benefit to everybody that participates in the program. So anyway, appreciate it.
Gary, what is your role with the association?
I'm on the board of directors for the association.
Okay.
So
Thanks for coming. And that really, having been now on the RAC for nearly, I think I'm going on 6 or 7 years, and I don't recall having a representative from the CWMU Association come and comment. And I appreciate that. And I really do think that'll help. I also, I wanted to make the comment that as you shared with the number of CWMUs that are present in our area, that's why I think it's always more of a hot topic in this Northern RAC. And I hope that our Wildlife Board and others recognize that. So when it goes to the Wildlife Board and maybe 4 out of the 5 RACs don't really address any of the CWMU issues, I hope that they really take consideration when our comments on this, because it isn't here. Yeah, I think it would be appropriate to have. Yes, please.
For all of us for some of us that don't know everything about the CWMU program, there's a great accountability system in place for the CWMUs to make sure that the landowners, operators they're operating inside the scope of the management plans and taking care of the public hunters. If there's a rogue CWMU that's not performing with the state hunters, with the landowners, they're trying to run their own program, well, then that operator, that landowner, there's an advisory committee that is already in place that can discuss these issues. So we have a great checks and balances in place for cooperative units. But by and large, I mean, there aren't very many cases like that. There are very few complaints. And if you look at the program in whole, it's a great program, and it's got some huge benefits to everybody. So
I would agree with that. I think there was a day when a lot of our landowners and a lot of people saw animals as a detriment to them. They saw them as a problem, and now the program has helped landowners, livestock, everyone work together and appreciate the wildlife. And I agree, there's a lot of good benefits to it. And I think there's some challenges in northern Utah because of the size. And I was happy to hear, to hear J-Lo when she talked about the recognizing, that we're overprotective and that there's a problem, and working together with Northern Utah to try to help with our management, because I've seen in my time on the RAC, I've noticed that the CWMUs have made it very difficult to manage all of our wildlife, just because of the divisions we're trying to work on our small public land areas, and what they're doing there is not taking place on the CWMUs. And I think it's great that they're coming together and recognizing. And again, I'm a fan also of the CWMU program, and I think it does a lot of great things. And again, happy that you're here, and I'd love to see more representation to come. And I think getting out there. So thank you.
Yeah, we're here. We're available. And I would just counter back on one thing you said. It is a cooperative unit, and I don't know any CWMUs that aren't that aren't really cooperating with the state and making it more difficult to manage and those manage the herds. So
I may have missed, but I didn't mean that they're making it different. It's just there's more challenges, and it's not anyone's
there are.
fault. There's just more challenges to northern Utah than there are in other places. So, okay.
Thanks.
Did I see a comment, Mike?
I actually sit on that oversight committee, and I can vouch for the fact that there's only a handful of complaints. With the amount of CWMUs, not only in the state of Utah, but in the northern region, we will get a handful of complaints a year, and then we work through them as a committee and make recommendations. It's a really good program. It's very well run. They come before that committee to defend themselves, and a lot of the time, there's two sides to every story. So it's a great program. I just wanted to vouch for the comment about very few that aren't compliant. So.
And I'm really grateful for the CWMU program as well. My understanding is without it, public would have zero access to a lot of these lands. And because of it, it provides access. And that means a lot. And as we sometimes get to wanting to put more rules or more oversight, and if we make it too tight, then these groups would just pull out and say it's not worth it anymore. And then we're back to no access. So how it's set up and how it works now, Mike, thank you for sharing that. And I really like the CWMU program.
I think it's with similar to, it's been going long enough. I'm not going to say that the system is perfect, but I do like the program and the way that it runs and opens up access, mainly because to the same point, how many would just sell the land into ranchettes on the other side? Not to say that there's not improvements to be made. We've had many discussions with, public land being included and numerous other issues that have come up. And I thank Chad and the division for their cooperation and being willing to look at these things and help address some of these issues. I think there is a public perception issue, to be quite frank, with the CWMU program. There's some misunderstandings, I believe, some warranted, some not. And I know working with Jayla a little bit this last week, I think there's probably a little bit of public expectation there that maybe they have too high of expectations or expect too easy of a hunt when they're on a CWMU, namely for antlerless. They drive around for half a day, don't see anything, and give up. And that's a bit of a wasted tag. So the program has been great. I appreciate that Gary being here and seeing representation there as well. I think it's a complex issue. With some of these units, Morgan, South Ridge, East Canyon has a big refuge area there that the elk can push to that is just straight private. There's no access. So it's not as simple as simply throwing more tags at it, whether it's on a CWMU or on public. And so appreciate the work of the division in this one.
I have a question. Are there any CWM units that take in BLM land?
Yes.
That's kind of a problem to me.
That's been a topic that's been come up quite a bit, usually in the fall when we're renewing CWMUs. So we're in the process right now. So we've already met as a CWMU committee this year to talk about the ones that are renewing this summer that have any public land, whether it's BLM, SITLA, Forest Service land. And through that process, the committee has a recommendation of how they want to see that public land handled in those situations. And then that will come back to the RAC and the board this fall. And so everyone that's renewing every year, it's going to go through that process. So it's going to be vetted as far as like if that public land should remain in there or if we should remove it through that process.
Thank you.
Do we have any other comments?
Justin, can I say one thing about? No.
Probably not. I apologize, but we can talk after. But Thank you. And you've been very helpful to be here, though. Okay. And we'll have a meeting when we will discuss just that topic. And that's when I think it'll be a great time to be here for that. All right. If there's no other questions or comments or discussion, I'd call for a motion.
I will. No one else is. I'll move to.
We got Mike making one right now.
I'll make the motion. We accept the proposal as presented.
So I have a motion by Mike to accept as presented. Do we have a second? Oh, Kevin beat you to it. We have a second by Kevin. Any discussion on the motion before I call for a vote? Okay. Ryan,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
and Nikki.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. I don't remember ever having a meeting where I had so many Ys on a paper. I know. So I want to thank everyone for, I want to thank everyone for their time. Before we call for adjourn, I believe Kevin just asked, he had a question.
Yeah, just real quick for you guys. I heard some people talking the other night, and a lady said that she had heard a story or saw a story in the news or something that they had found COVID discovered COVID in a deer. I know being out with you guys, and I know that you take tests on all of the animals. Is there any information being released about COVID being present in the wildlife, and if so, what effect it's having on them?
We put David Smedley in charge of the deer mask mandate. And so, no, and all kidding aside, there are a lot of wild reservoirs, and by a lot of wildlife and animals are reservoirs for COVID. I mean, they found it early on in bats. They found it in whitetail before they found it here. We found it in minks in the States. So when they found it in mule deer, I don't think anybody was, it wasn't a surprise to us. We also don't know a lot about how it affects them. No symptoms, didn't appear to have any symptoms. Not sure that it's transferable back to humans, but have no idea. But I think that just the fact that deer aren't the only wild reservoir, right? It could be in a lot of species, including some domesticated animals as well, is just, it's probably around, it's going to get passed around and back and forth. But I don't know what that means.
Did they find it in any elk, Kobe?
We didn't test. We only tested, we get our hands on a lot more deer. And I think it came as the USDA had a lot of interest in this. So they asked us if we were willing to test the deer. Well, we had them in hand. It came on a deer that we hadn't handled it. We know that it didn't come from our personnel because we hadn't handled it previously. And so we're not sure exactly how it got there or what it means, but it didn't have any symptoms. That's good.
Thank you. All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Kevin.
Second.
Second by Ryan. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time and being here. And thanks to the public for coming and all those who participated.
Thank you.
Thank you.